So my library just had their annual book sale and I picked up a bunch of books about writing, so I'm going to show you what I got. I'm always looking for new craft books to read, but most of mine come from the library, so, let's be honest, the myth of the starving artist is very true. So they had a bunch of hardcover and paperback books on sale. They were not things that were part of the library's catalog, but things that had been donated to the library that ultimately were not added to the catalog. And I actually really wanted to get some fiction. I wanted some new fantasy to read. And by the time we got there, even though it had only been open for like 20 minutes, the fantasy section was so picked over. But there was a nice big nonfiction section that had a bunch of books for writers, and I picked up a couple things, and I'm looking forward to getting through them. Most of these books are older, but I always feel like good writing advice never expires. There's a reason that we go back to the same books for writing advice over and over again because it continues to be good advice. So I picked up 6 books. It cost me about $10. And I'm going to add these into my reading rotation. I try to keep one nonfiction book and one fiction book going at the same time so that I have, depending on my mood, I can pick up something that's, fantasy that I love to read or something that's going to educate me. I guess it depends on how much brain power I have at the end of the day. So interestingly, everything that I picked up was published by Writer's Digest. I guess that's not really a surprise. Their whole thing is writing advice. But the first one is Deadly Doses, A Writer's Guide to Poisons. I'm sure this is probably meant more for, mystery writers, but there is a big overlap of poison usage in fantasy fiction. In fact, poison is like a really big theme in The Artificer's Wife, which is the 3rd book in my Artisan Magic fantasy romance series. So this was written by a nurse, and it has all different types of poisons listed in here. So you can see it's got sections on things in your house that are poison, the classic poisons, there's poisonous plants, fungi, there's animals, medication, pesticide, industrial poisons, and a chapter on creating your own poison, which I'm really looking forward to. The appendix is also something that I think is going to be really useful because it is poisons by the symptoms they cause. So you can actually look up the symptoms that you want to have if you've already gotten started and then pick a poison going from that. And a lot of these books are from like around 1990 or so. So that makes them, they're like 35 years old. But I can't help but wonder when I'm looking at these, like, who was it that donated these to the library to be sold? And I wonder if they were able to finish their books and get them out there, get them published so that they have readers. It's always interesting when the books we read develop stories around themselves just because of having been read. So the next one was the theme and strategy, because I always see people talking about theme in stories, and I don't write with the intention of inserting a theme. It just kind of pops up later, I guess, and some of my books I'm sure have no theme. So this one is part of a series, and I am pretty sure I've got 3 books from this series. It was all that they had, but they sounded decent. But I kind of think they came from the same person because all of them have dog-eared pages, and I think that's going to be really interesting to read through because I'm going to see what people who read this before found most interesting and most useful. It appears to be more about structure, like how to bring plot threads together into a unified front for the story, and I'm interested to see how that works out because I don't string anything together, my books just happen. Next is also in that series, it is Characters and Viewpoint, and that one is by Orson Scott Card, which should be interesting to read because he tends to be very opinionated. But I think the book is fairly self-explanatory from the description on the front cover. It's very interesting to have a subtitle that long. I don't know how much this one is going to work for me for character development because I'm not the kind of person who manufactures characters based on what I need. Maybe I should be, but my character creation process tends to be a lot more organic than that. but I think educating yourself on how other people do it is always wise. And there are quite a few sections in this book that have been dog-eared. Don't know if you can see, like on the top of the book there. Yep, lots of them folded down. So this was clearly useful for somebody. And then last one in the same series is for plot. And for all that, I shared my outlining method in my last video. I don't really do a whole lot of like plot structuring or anything, and I always feel like maybe my stories would be better if I did, instead of being, you know, the kind of person that writes based on what feels right. I think there's a lot more passion that goes into something than, you know, just writing by what feels good to the author's spirit. But I don't know if that helps me get better. So I'm always looking for things that might help me get better. And there's one dog-eared section in this. I'm gonna peek because I'm curious. Ooh, a matter of life and death is what's dog-eared. And then there was another plot book, which is Building Better Plots. This one was newer. This one was published in 1999, so that's probably why it looks a little bit more modern. But this is, again, a Writer's Digest book. So what made this one interesting to me was it says that it has charts, quick quizzes, timelines, and a complete plot tutorial. And the idea of like a plot checklist seems interesting to me, so I'm curious to see what comes of that. And I haven't had a chance to page through it yet. Oh, there's a bookmark in here. What is this? It says, "Here's your free gift, an inspirational bookmark for your reading enjoyment." An inspirational bookmark was somebody's free gift. That is now my free gift. 1999, Publishers Clearinghouse. Oh, that is so funny. It looks like it's handwritten. This is totally printed. So that's an interesting find. Thank you, Dorothy. 25 years later. So the last thing I got was, I think it was the most interesting book that I saw among the writer's manuals. And it's outdated, so it wouldn't be useful if I were trying to pursue this or anything. But consistently, one of the problems that I have as a writer is that you reach a point where it becomes very difficult to find high-level advice. It gets very hard to find resources that are on a high enough level that they can teach you something new or answer your questions if you have more advanced questions about story structure or grammar or things like that, punctuation even. As many resources as there are online, it's really hard to find high-level information. Everything is kind of cluttered with beginner information, which is great, but sometimes I need something a little more precise. I need the chance to ask an expert, so I'm hoping that there will be enough in this to make it worth the $1 that I paid for it. But this is the 11th edition of the Little Brown Handbook. So Little Brown has since been swallowed by Hachette. I don't know how old this one is. I didn't actually look. Let's see if I can find it in the front pages, just out of curiosity. This one is from 2010, so it's actually not super old. This one is 14 years old, but I'm sure there is a newer edition of this because publishers and editors are always changing and updating how they do things. But this is what would be called a style book. This is how this particular publisher wants their books to be edited and formatted. And I've never seen one of these in the wild. Obviously, I knew they existed because it's common for publishers to make sure their editors have these, their authors have these, so that things from the get-go are being edited according to their standards. And this is also considered, you know, educational material. There would probably be a course related to this that you would be expected to go through. So the first couple sections are just about like the process of writing, like fleshing out ideas and everything. But then here, part 3 is what I think is probably going to be the most useful for me because it is all about grammar. So it's got information about all sorts of advanced grammar and cleaning up sentences. It's got information on tense. There's a whole section on punctuation. with punctuation rules. And again, you know, this is stylistic. So this is going to be to the standards of Little Brown, and other publishers might have different standards that they expect to meet. So here's sections on like choosing effective words. And then it goes into things like, you know, like writing online, essay writing, things like that. That's not going to be as useful. But I'm really hoping that the sections on grammar are going to be useful to me, and that maybe I'll be able to learn something that I haven't been able to find as easily online. So like here, like use of progressive tenses and stuff, that's going to be an interesting read. I'm sure this is the kind of stuff that you would probably learn if you went through like an MFA program, if you were an English major. I was not. I was an art major, and I never took a single English class in my entire life. So if you ever think my grammar is weird, that's because I taught it to myself. I guess that's not really a problem because every editor that I have worked on has been very impressed with my grammar. But yeah, that's my book stack. If you've read any of these, or if you have some other craft book recommendations for me, I would love to hear them. I will definitely let you know what I think of these as I get through them, but I'm kind of a slow reader because if I have time and I have to choose between I can write or I can read, I'm usually going to choose to write because that's how my books come into existence. So it's kind of my goal right now to read like one nonfiction book and one fiction book each month. Sometimes I only get through one book, but hopefully I'll get through all of these by the end of the year. And if I pick up any little nuggets of wisdom that I didn't already have, then I'll let you know. But yeah, if you have craft book recommendations, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.